Morning, everybody. First of all, I'd just like to say thank you for taking the time to be on this today. Not the circumstances we wanted to see everybody, but it's good to see everybody nonetheless. I'd like to echo what Steve said. We'd like to really thank the frontline workers and everybody impacted by this virus. And our thoughts go out to those family members that are, going through this and impacted by this virus. As you all know, the AHL decided to cancel the remainder of the 1920 season and the playoffs. Just kind of wanted to go through the process. This is not something that the group took lightly. We've been working from a president's point of view and the operations point of view for the last several weeks to make sure that we were thinking through the process, to make sure that we were considering all options before we made this decision. And then ultimately we decided to put it to a vote last Friday when we convened the Board of Governors. It was a unanimous vote. All teams voted to cancel the season immediately. And we didn't take it lightly. As I said, this is the first time in 83 years that the Calder Cup will not be awarded. So we understand the magnitude of this decision, but we wanted to make sure that we took into account the safety of our fans, our players, and our employees when we made this decision. So ultimately, it's a tough decision, but one that had to be made. And I do want to say how incredibly proud I am of our staff and everything we've done in this season from a community standpoint. And Kevin can touch on the amazing activity we had on the ice and how we got ourselves into a playoff position just right before the pause. And I'm increasingly proud of what we're doing in the community during this pandemic and during this shutdown. So it's something we're going to continue to push forward and support and celebrate San Diego and help out where we can. So again, I just wanted to say thank you to everybody for being here today, and I'll turn it back over to Steve.
Is there anyone with a question to kick things off?
Hacksaw.
Lee, go ahead.
Yeah, Matt, thank you. I've got a couple of questions if I could move along here. The loss of the 6 home games and then the loss of the potential home games in the playoffs, from a dollar value, how much does that cost your team in terms of revenue stream? And then I've got some follow-ups.
Lee, I think the question was the dollar value lost with our six lost games. Is that correct?
6 lost games and then the potential of the revenue stream you get from postseason. How much do you lose there total?
Yeah, so while I'm not going to get into the specifics of the actual dollars lost, as you can imagine, this is a small business in San Diego. That's what we look at ourselves as. And just like the other small businesses that are impacted, the loss of revenue of 6 games from ticketing and food and beverage, as well as merchandise, it takes a toll. And it's something that a lot of businesses are facing, and I know the other teams are, and it did go into consideration when we were deciding whether or not to cancel, as we were looking to find ways to generate new revenue. But ultimately, the safety of our fans and our community kind of won out. And while this a game that is dollars are necessary, we decided from a community standpoint and across the North America, it made more sense to step away and really take those dollars and put them kind of in a second position. The goal really is to recoup as much as we can. We've been communicating with our season ticket holders and asking them to push their dollars into next season. While we want to be cognizant of the dollars that are lost, we want to be focused on the fact that we're keeping our fans safe, and we're asking them to transition their season ticket dollars into games next season, whether it's additional tickets or donating them. But ultimately, we're trying to keep the dollars on account, just like any small business. You'll want to make sure that you're focusing on revenues, but ultimately safety won out in this case.
Follow up, if I could. Aside from the safety and the testing and the health issues, what was the second or third biggest deterrent? Was it players having to come across the border? Would they be allowed to come back into the country, or length of camp, or the expense of staging more games without fan revenue? What were the other big issues that weighed on your mind aside from the priority issue of safety and testing?
Yeah, for a lot of the discussion, it's the unknown, and travel, I'll just take as your first point. We've got players that are all over the globe, as they were all sent home through the pause. And so the travel restrictions are something we definitely took into account. But it's a lot of unknown. It's once they do get to their city of play, what does that city order have? What does that state order have? And can we follow that in order to have a consistent game plan so that all teams can play equally? So really the unknown is probably the major reason, just because we weren't sure of the circumstances in every city that we play in.
And one more, have you had any Gulls players notify you that they tested positive after they went home?
Not that I know of.
So Lee, to answer your question, throughout the organization, the Anaheim Ducks and the San Diego Gulls, we have not had any players that have shown signs or tested positive.
Okay, thank you. One follow-up for Kevin, please. Kevin, as a former player, how long a camp do you think your guys would have needed to be ready to go to the AHL playoffs? And then I guess in the bigger picture, as the NHL tries to relaunch somewhere in whatever form or fashion, as a player perspective, how long would they need a camp to get ready to go play NHL games? Thank you.
Okay, got the mute off. Figured. Hey, first, Lee, you said to Matt a couple times potential playoff gates, right? So, given our start to the season, that was certainly. But I have to say, the way we were playing towards the end, we were really excited about a long playoff run. In saying that, you know what? That question is really something that plays into the NHL situation moving forward. So probably inappropriate for our group. You know what? I've been really excited. I've been in touch with the players myself, our strength and conditioning, our medical staff, to follow up on Brownie's comment, has done a great job of every 3 days touching base with every member of our organization. But our strength and conditioning is right on top of these players to keep themselves prepared. So as far as to put an actual number, the date, I think that's really hard to do. And I know that there's probably internal discussions going on about that right now. So hard to say. I mean, training camp in the regular season, boy, you jump right in after a couple of weeks. That's how the game has evolved in a lot of ways, that these players, they don't even get out of shape any longer. So I think it would have happened in a fairly timely manner. Do your players, Kevin, have access to ice time? I mean, they do weight training on their own, running on their own, but no ice time? No ice time. The rink is off limits for the most part. I was reading an article, and by the way, to all you members of the media, I just, you know what, I've always been a guy to pick up the paper, and I watch the evening news every night now, and thank you for all your contributions for keeping us informed and going out there and making sure there's a ton of quality information for us to have. So I did read an article recently where a player that is currently with Toronto, his family owns a rink in BC. He's ending up on the ice a couple different times, but as far as the San Diego area, there's no ice in here. And from the contact I've had with all our players, they are in the middle of their strength and conditioning programs, but they are not on the ice. Thank you very much. Brownie?
Thanks, Lee. We have a question from Patrick Williams. So Patrick, floor is yours.
This question is for Matt. My question is, this league, is largely built around, a middle-class kind of fan base, working class. And, you look at the economy right now, you look at unemployment, and as well as the businesses. How much of a focus is there on being sensitive, to what some of your, fans and sponsors are going through financially as far as, tickets and planning and sponsorships and that sort of thing?
Yeah, good to see you, Patrick. Thanks for being on. Yeah, as you know, the league has different ownership structures. So, the vast majority of the AHL is owned by an NHL franchise. There are several teams that are not, and those are where, we kind of take a look at those as teams that are potentially going to need some assistance. Where we look at the vast majority that are owned and operated by NHL, we're able to sustain this type of a situation. So you look at the sponsors. We have sponsors that we work with every single day that are part of the lifeblood of who we are in San Diego. So we are very cautious when we're going back to both our fans and our partners to make sure that as we're working out our contracts for next year and beyond, we're cognizant of what they're going through. You can see on our website the ticket refund policy is something that I touched on earlier, and it's one of the options. But at the same time, we're trying to recreate that atmosphere next year. So we want people, sponsors and fans, to come back to the arena, use their tickets, bring their neighbors, and that way we can continue this kind of passionate experience that everybody has when they come to AHL games. But yes, it is something we've talked about at length, understanding that a lot of these teams are in small markets. A lot of the sponsors are local sponsors, or in the same situation that we all are.
And then just a follow-up question.
Sorry, just a follow-up for Matt on that. How much of a concern is there for some of those independently owned teams? Even, some of them are very strong franchises, Hershey, Syracuse, teams like that, but they don't necessarily have that same financial model that an NHL-owned affiliate would.
Yeah, and I'll echo Dave Andrews' statements over the past couple of weeks about liability and the strength of our league, and really how financially viable we really are, and the ability to continue down the path. We all know the AHL is a primary support team or support league for the NHL, so we're working in hand with the NHL to make that the players are available for future years. So the depth that the AHL has from a financial standpoint is very strong, and Dave said that. I feel even though NHL owned franchise, the viability of the AHL is strong.
Just one for Kevin. Speaking with a few different coaches, some of them have expressed their concern that it's hard to plan a player's off-season program without really firmly knowing when the return date is, and there's the possibility of almost overtraining and maybe burning out. How much of a concern is that for you with your players?
Well, not at all. And by the way, Patrick, I've enjoyed reading you this year. I think
Thank you.
Great job covering the league. So that's been enjoyable. For me, that's not an issue. Boy, I mean, you know what? We've all been sitting around here for a couple months, and the one thing I am really impressed with is the level of commitment by the players to prepare themselves, whether it's for practice, that they get there early, they stretch. I know they go to yoga classes, they do a ton of things to prepare themselves. And you know what? The way I've always looked at it, I think every player, they're part of the San Diego Gulls, they're part of the Anaheim Duck organization, but they're also kind of their own business of themselves. So we do have not only our complete staff and the ability to train nutrition, hydration, rest, all those things, psychologists, they have a ton of resources available to them. So for me, that's the least of my worries. I know as a, coming from a player's background, you know what? I know these guys are chomping at the bit. I know for a fact that everybody's disappointed today that the reality is actually set in, that we won't be playing playoff hockey. I think we all know the best hockey is in mid-May for the next 3 weeks or so. That's where things get really exciting. And you know what? Those opportunities don't come along very often. So if and when we go, I expect them not to be overtrained. I expect them to be just so excited to hit the ice.
Thanks.
Thanks, Patrick. Eric Stevens, you had a question for Matt, I believe?
Yeah, I sure do. Great to see everyone, by the way. Matt, jumping off a little bit of what Patrick alluded to earlier, obviously, the NHL, the AA, all leagues want fans in the stands, obviously. The NHL has talked about, possibly resuming its season at one point, without them, but the AA certainly, maybe say, quote unquote, needs fans more. what's your concern level or even lack of concern level that this continues on, say, for weeks, months on end, and you're going into the 2021 season without fans? What's your concern or lack of concern level that you won't be able to open things back up if you can't open them to fans?
Yeah, good to see you, Eric. Glad you're on. We've gone through multiple scenarios. Some include less fans or no fans. What we've been going through for the last 4 weeks about is multiple versions of business plans and budgets. So we've got a plan for a regular start in October, which you guys have seen every year recently, and all the way through to a much different look where we play in front of less fans or no fans from a TV standpoint only. I know the NHL is considering those options. So I know that I have concern, but I know that we're prepared. And I also know that there's a governing body, AHL and the NHL, and they are going to set the rules across the league. So we're going to be able to follow the process and make sure that we're doing what is right for the teams, the communities, and the fans that are all there. So I recognize that these are options that we need to consider. I have my staff going through every single scenario from start to finish. So when the one that does present itself, we are ready for it. But I'm not overly concerned because I do feel confident in the decisions that will be made from an AHL standpoint. We'll follow those rules and we'll make the best of the situation.
And Matt, if I can ask, just typically, it doesn't have to be exact, or if you can offer even a ballpark, what is your typical yearly revenue that you bring in? If you can round it to a number.
Yeah, appreciate the question. Not something that I'm going to publicly communicate. I just step away from that. There's a lot of different revenue sources that we look at, and a lot of costs that we go through to ensure that we're viable from a financial standpoint, but not something I'm comfortable talking about publicly.
And if I can just ask one quick one for Kevin, how many of those workout plans with players whatsoever have you done? Any of them, or are there any virtual in nature? Just curious.
Absolutely. I done them? And yes, I have. I actually had our strength and conditioning guys send me my program too, and it's fabulous. You know what? We're getting there's a video breakdown. Guys are actually working out together on the internet, having that opportunity to work with our strength and conditioning staff as well. So you know what? There's no stone unturned, and that's one thing this organization has really put a priority on, is to make sure that when we hit the ice, we're ready to roll.
Thank you, everyone.
Coach, just wanted to touch base with you. You come off that big win in Tucson right before the season is on pause. What were your impressions of the team that you had after coming off that win with that stretch run in sight and potentially locking down a playoff spot?
Well, that was the last game of a 7-game road trip. I think we were 5-1-1, maybe 5-2. I'm not sure what it was, but I do know that, you know what, you look at things in the short term, and I have to say that our last game was literally one of our best. The quality of the performances by our goaltending, our defense. Troy Terry came up and put a major statement on his season by scoring 2 goals and 2 assists there. It was an exciting time for us. We really felt like we were trending in the right direction, and heading into the playoffs, we would have been a formidable opponent for whoever we faced. So that was a good game for us. That was one that you walked out of and you went, wow, we're ready to go. And then all of a sudden you kind of woke up in the morning and you realized that things were going to start evolving on a quick pace. And but if you're going to leave a game, certainly our last game in Tucson was a really, really solid, probably our best game of the year.
Thanks, AJ, and thanks, Kevin. Darnay from NBC.
For Kevin, I was, kind of along those same lines. If you kind of take inventory of your first season from, you mentioned a slow start to obviously a good finish and then not being able to complete the season, just your thoughts on what you guys were able to accomplish and how year one was for you.
Well, for one, it was a tough start. I mean, you go 0-6, it's like, yikes, what did I get myself into? And really, I take a lot of the responsibility for the way our team started. I don't think our personnel was in the best of spots as far as our line combinations, that kind of thing. And I think, you know what, as the season wore on, I think we really found a formula that was working for our team. And you know what, it's my second time around with the Anaheim organization. So I spent time in Portland, Maine, 3 years, and Samueli family had just bought the team at that time. So we kind of moved into that together. And I have to say, I don't know, I think any business you're part of, it's about the people you're around. And starting with our leadership group, including our management team that's on this call right now, it's not always fun, but boy, was it a pleasurable to go to the rink every day. And the players that we had, I mean, we're a development league, so we always talk about our young players, but we had some fabulous veterans as well. So a really, really enjoyable year. I have to say, working with this group was an absolute pleasure. And it feels like every unfinished business, but I think that's being said right around our whole league right now. So, you're in San Diego. You can always talk about the weather and all the good things that go along with living here. But being part of this organization, you feel very fortunate.
And I believe Eric asked Matt about next season. How much concern is there from your standpoint that this could impact preseason and into October and beyond as well?
Well, I'm like everybody else. I mean, whether you work in professional sports or you work at a restaurant in town, whatever it is, you know what? Our first concern and the only thing that we're worried about or our thoughts are, it's in the immediate. It's with our players, it's with our staff, our fan base, and making sure that that's a safe, enjoyable environment for people to come and enjoy sports. And hey, I'll say it again, nothing I would enjoy more than I can look across the bay here and see the Padres Stadium. I wouldn't mind being over there and seeing a ball game right now. So, you know what? We'll just prepare. We'll be ready. And again, when we hit the ice, we'll be excited to get back and enjoy not only being doing something that we love, but also entertaining some fans as well.
Thanks, Darnay. And then I'll go back to Derek Togerson, who's on the phone. Derek?
Hey, can you all hear me now?
Yep, we can hear you.
Excellent. Thanks, guys. Thanks for doing this. One question for Matt and then one for Coach, if I can. Matt, you're talking about trying to talk to the season ticket holders about what's going on for maybe next year and holding some of those dollars. If the NHL does continue their season deeper on, one of the things they've talked about is maybe pushing the start of the next season, 2021, back into November, December, somewhere along those lines. Would the AHL then follow suit? And we call the fans here America's finest fans for a good reason. How has the response been from the ticket holders about this delay and how willing they are to come back and watch Gulls games again?
Thanks, Derek. As far as the delay, I'll say a phrase that I've said far too often recently. I just don't know. I don't know what the future holds. I do know that the AHL will set the standard and will set the rule. And if it is pushed back, follow that. I will communicate. America's finest fans are true to form. They have been excellent with the announcement that came out yesterday. They've been really gracious, really understanding, and really supportive. They want their hockey. They want their Gulls hockey for certain, but they understand the situation we're in. We've got a very positive response both on social media and kind of just email and phone calls. So we know they're supportive. We know they'll come back. We need to make sure that when they do come back, the experience is safe, the experience is clean, and it's approved through our governing bodies.
And then Derek, you had a follow-up for Kevin Dineen?
Yeah, please. And then, Coach, you guys, the Gulls will not be playing any more games this year, but the Ducks might. And if they do, it might be in a lot of games in a short amount of time, which could mean expanded rosters. How much do you now, and you touched on the strength and conditioning a little bit, but how much do you now talk to your guys saying, hey, you might not be playing in San Diego, but you might be up in Anaheim now, so make sure you stay ready. And if you had those conversations or altered the training at all based on that?
Well, yes, we've had conversations constantly, and you know what? It's been a steady stream. For the first week, I spoke to every one of our players, and then I had my assistants reach out the following week. Dallas reached out to most every player in our lineup as well, which is a really nice touch when a player hears from the NHL head coach. And then I've reached out again in the last week here. And you know what's been great about it? Just the communication, the ability to, we talk hockey, we talk training, but we also talk how they're doing and where they are. And it's been enjoyable to catch up with these guys. So to answer your question, yes, we are talking and we want them to stay prepared. And, we didn't know for finality until yesterday that we were not going to play. And that was the message, that we need to stay ready. And I know I'm hitting the road here in the next couple days to get my family back east, and on those long roads across the country here. I think I'll be picking up the phone and retouching with all the players and getting a little heads up on some of the travel that they've done over the last little bit. But you know what? I think everybody realizes there's all kinds of scenarios that could play out. And I think every player realizes that they need to stay ready if called.
Thanks, Derek. So Patrick Williams, we'll go to you. And then Lee, I saw you raise your hand. So Lee, you can go after Patrick.
Yeah, this one's for Kevin. Hockey's such a go kind of sport. It's pretty much year round now. Having some of this downtime for your players, how do you think that some of them might change, especially some of the younger guys after going through this? And will there be greater appreciation for what they do, and just kind of where do you expect their heads to be at when they do come back?
I think there'll be a change. I mean, I know I've changed. You're around your families as much as you have. I think you really get to appreciate some of the smaller things that you might get rolling in the middle of the season, and your focus is so internally on your team, on your players, on travel, etc. Now you're able to kind of take a bigger picture, and you know what, you're dealing with a lot of young kids too, and I call them kids, but young men that are still developing physically. They're still maturing as people, and I think. Like I mentioned briefly earlier, I think there's such a great appreciation by our players, not only for the organization they play, but how blessed they are to be able to do what they love and actually make a paycheck, and to entertain other people. I know they're in a tough spot right now, and I think, like all of us, there's been some rotten days, but they also know that they are very, very fortunate to be. And as mentioned by Brownie, I think we've done a good job making sure that not only they're safe, but checking in on their immediate loved ones too, just to make sure that if there's anything that this organization can do to help. And we've been fortunate that that hasn't arisen.
Thanks, Patrick. Lee?
Yeah, Matt, a follow-up. Can you kind of put into words what the emotion of the conference call, the media conference or video conference call with all the other board of governors was like? I mean, was it somber? Was it solemn? Was it just business as usual? This is what we're living through. And then secondly, Bob Murray or David McNabb representing the Ducks on the call, and what was their attitude, risk versus reward, in terms of maybe trying to help the AHL to start up again? Thank you.
Yeah, no problem. So the Board of Governors call itself was very businesslike, and that's because we had several conversations leading up to it. The meeting was not a surprise. It was end result of weeks and weeks of discussions and planning and making sure that we were making a proper decision for everybody involved. So the Friday vote was fairly businesslike. And as far as the hockey operations department in Anaheim, I don't know that they're represented on this call. That's more on the hockey side of things. And Kevin, I don't know that you were involved in those discussions. So from a business standpoint, we went through the process and obviously kept Anaheim in the loop on the decision and ultimately the vote, and we're able to go kind of hand in hand with the vote on Friday.